What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. We got an interview today with Brian. How are you?
Good, John. Thanks for having me on. How's it going?
Doing well. Yeah, Brian, I think was it a little over 2 years ago? I think that we crossed paths at one of the August strict curl meets that we were hosting. Maybe a little like 2 years. That sound about right?
Yeah, August 2022 was my second official strict curl meet, and I would say the meet at your gym was really the one that got me hooked. So yeah, that's the first time we met.
Excellent. So I definitely want to kind of like go back to that, but before we talk about that particular day and kind of what you've done since then. So I know I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that like maybe like at least arm wrestling is something that you've done for a long time. There's definitely I've seen like a lot of crossover where whether it's strict curl athletes arm wrestle or arm wrestling athletes strict curl or vice versa, there definitely seems to be like something to that like lower kind of arm strength and your grip strength and forearm strength that tends to cross over. But tell us a little bit about what your athletic background is, a little bit of your history, maybe some of like your accolades, best lifts, and all that.
Yeah, for sure. So you're spot on. Came primarily from an arm wrestling background. I started arm wrestling back in 2013, on and off. Once I had kids, obviously family life and dad life put a wrench in arm wrestling a bit just due to priorities. But as you're aware, in arm wrestling, right, it's a lot more than bicep strength. It's hand strength, it's finger pressure, it's forearm strength, it's static strength. It's a lot of wrist flexion, pronation, supination, being able to use your whole body and explode at once. And a lot of those arm wrestling training tactics really have carried over for me in the strict curl. Like I'm still a student of the business, but a lot of the power that I was able to generate from some of the high level arm wrestling back in the day, I would say has helped me especially climb over certain milestones as I've climbed to 200 plus. Personal best in the strict curl is 207.23 pounds, which I hit last June with 100% raw at the American Challenge in New Jersey. At that time, it broke the world record, and then Bruce. I brought Bruce out of retirement, and he broke it. I want to say like 3 or 4 weeks after, which was awesome. Really set the bar. I think he has it like 210.5 pounds currently, but yeah, that's a little bit about my background and my personal best. I don't do a lot of bench, deadlift, squats. I think my best bench ever was like 345, 350, and deadlift I can still pull 4 plates, but I nothing like I used to in college, no like 495, 500 or anything like that.
Yeah. So when did I guess the strict curl kind of get on your radar, and like I guess what made you decide that you want to kind of jump in a contest?
Yeah, I trained strict curl a lot for arm wrestling actually, and years back, Joe Freeney, co-CEO of Strict Curl Nation, actually commented on one of my posts, and he was like, "Hey, that's really, really strong. You should consider competing." And then the coronavirus days, they
Yeah.
held an online competition called the Corona Curl Challenge, and I did really well. I placed like second or third out of hundreds of people that had entered virtually, and that got me really excited. And then really after that, I decided to double down on my strength and kind of see how high and how far I could go with it.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of circle back to our meet August and yeah, kind of same similar kind of thing. We the first time that we did a strict curl meet, it was we did unsanctioned. We didn't have like a platform, we didn't have a bench or anything. I think we just used like a regular like easy bar at the time. Um, and yeah, we kind of just we had some fun. It was an outdoor thing, which apparently that was like safer for whatever reasons. But we did an outdoor contest, and then from there, Strict Curl Nation started to kind of build up some steam, and a lot of our athletes, you got Big John and Panamanian Hulk and Ed Joseph and all these guys started to kind of emerge as some of like the top competitors, and they've been doing really well ever since. You can kind of alongside them similar amount of time. So what was I guess what was about our meet that maybe got you hooked or that like really kind of set the fire under you a little bit more? Because obviously since then it definitely seems like you've been on a good progression tear and definitely been one of the top guys, in the 220 class for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean, I loved one the ambience at your gym and two the energy. I think that was like the energy was top notch. Like everybody was cheering each other on. Everyone was kind of feeding off of each other. There were, some pretty big, even by today's standards, some pretty decent and big numbers being pushed. And I just thought end to end, the way the meet was run and you know, just the camaraderie from start to finish was just fantastic. So really had a great time.
Anything as far as like how your kind of training has evolved over the years, or even just maybe before we kind of talk about the training, um, you're definitely been getting like at least from my view, you seem like you're getting a good handle on like the technique, the technical aspects of it. Really kind of, um, I had a conversation with Michael Oliver. Sometimes we mentioned like even on a PR attempt, sometimes if like the bar path is just right, sometimes it kind of feels like effortless. Um, as far as like as you've been like refining your technique, improving the technical aspects of it, what was it like kind of maybe like learning the technique initially, and then any kind of I guess tips for people that are maybe starting out that may be a little confused on what they should be focused on. They're trying to be more efficient with their bar path. What are some things that kind of have helped you refine your form?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say big in and out of strict curl, it's learning by doing. Curl. Like that's the biggest thing for me. The biggest advice is do what works for you. I would say, especially on the gopher bar, right? Like, the bar itself, it loves to flip on you. The angles are a bit like very unique, very different. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with it. I remember the first time I gripped with it, I was all over the place. I couldn't seem to get it right. But just time, like continuously training on it, finding the right grip, reaching out to the experts like John Cooper, Bruce Knox, Gary Teeter, just for like tips and advice. I would send them videos like, "Hey, what do you think?" And it was like, "Hey, go a little bit wider with your feet, get a better base." Some people don't like a wide stance; it feels uncomfortable for them. So that goes back to my initial advice of do what's comfortable for you, and then by just learning by doing, once you do it enough, you will find the positioning and the stance and the overall technique to get that bar path that eventually works for you. Once you get that, it's all about just micro refinement, kind of getting it optimized. um, and that's really kind of been my evolution and what's really worked well for me.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to say, like when it comes to strength training, powerlifting techniques, and certainly this goes hand in hand with strict curl, is there's like thing form, style, technique, and there's certain things in terms of like your form where you obviously have to like have a contest standard. So there's certain things that are kind of like universal that in order for it to get white lights, in order to get credit for the lift in a meet, that like this has to be done. And then there's like things like you mentioned before, like in terms of like your stance width and how you grip the bar, how you like take the bar out. I think success leaves clues, but there's definitely kind of room for like some style and some different like kind of nuanced things. Some people have a certain approach or a certain way they kind of take out the bar that's kind of comfortable for them, like you kind of mentioned before. Someone that maybe more comfortable with their feet more out in front of them. Some people maybe be comfortable with like a wide base. So I think that there's definitely kind of room to kind of experiment, and then just kind of see what works, like you said, works for you, and then what you can kind of build on. And then I do think that like once things kind of click, you'll kind of okay, you have a couple of good repetitions, and you kind of will know okay, this feels like it's correct for me. And I think that's a really good like kind of indication that you're on the right track. So in terms of like the actual, I know you definitely do some unique things. I know I've seen you do some like
Very weird. Yeah. Very unique training.
one
Yeah.
arm curls and stuff, and I don't know if there's like anything to it. And also like sometimes I tell people sometimes like it could just be a matter of like preference, or it could just be something you enjoy. But um out of maybe some of the outside of like just doing the strict curl itself, are there any maybe like unique exercises that you kind of feel have been beneficial, or anything that's kind of like a staple in your training to help improve your bicep
Yeah.
forearm strength?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people anything that makes you stronger in the arms, forearms, or hands is not going to be detrimental to the strict curl. Anything. Now, will it translate 100%? Maybe or maybe not, but getting stronger in any area is not going to make you lose poundage, assuming the technique and everything else, there's no variability there. For me, I do a lot of one arm curls and I do a lot of like static holds. I think in basic powerlifting, you may agree or you may have a different, but you get stronger in the range of motion that you train at. So for me, you'll see me do a lot of times like super heavy weight at the half curl position and holding it in a static position. And the reason I do that is, a lot of people do seated curls for the same reason. I'm like blasting past the sticking point. But for me, if I'm able to generate enough power in that half curl position, if I can get the bar there, chances are I will be able to finish it. So it's very rare for me to actually be able to get it, get the bar with the weight at a midway position and not be able to complete the lift. Very seldom does that happen. It's happened. But I think the one arm curls goes back to really Dennis Saplenkov. I'm sure you know Dennis. He was a big fan of one arm barbell curls. I kind of emulated and took that from him. That's more arm wrestling specific. I do think there is some carryover. I would say that you really need to be careful on the form because I think with the twists and how your body moves, it could present and lead to a higher risk of injury. So if someone's starting out, I would say probably don't do it with heavy weight. Start like light. And then as you get more advanced and have a better understanding of the movement, that may be the time to incorporate it in. But I would say those are my two staples outside of just general strict curl is really the one arm curls and then the bicep static holds, which seems to be kind of like my signature style.
Yeah, so can you explain for people that are listening, or can you explain as far as me, like what kind of, I know you kind of mentioned you're like in like the low, 200 range, 205, between 205 and 210 max. So what is the difference in poundage in terms of like, a percentage of one rep max? Are you doing like over your max? Are you doing near your max? And then like what kind of range of motion and like what's the setup like for those heavy holds?
Yeah, so I do about 70 to 75% as like a max hold for a period of upwards of 7 to 10 seconds. I'll start at about 50% for a longer hold, anywhere up from like 15 to 20. And then I will work up to, I think my personal best is like 150 pounds at around like 7 to 8 seconds. The goal is not for your arm to be leaning into your stomach as kind of like a brace. Really have your arm at the side of your body, not anchoring it on anything, and really making sure that the force is really directly on the bicep. So essentially, you're one, think of the hand power, right, to one to stabilize it. Two, the wrist flexion and the wrist strength just to hold the bar to prevent your wrist from really caving in. And then three, just all that force on your bicep. I would say the trade-off is it's very easy for that bar to get away from you or kind of slip if you don't have a good grip on it. So I would recommend obviously one, good footwear, two, just gradually work up to it. I've been doing this type of lift for years just due to the arm wrestling background. It's very unique and unusual and awkward for newer people that do it. But I do feel, especially when I hit that 207-pound curl back in June, I was really doubling down on a lot of my static work. Um, and it seemed to translate and really pay off in that meet. So
Yeah, so I guess I've seen maybe some others. Maybe it's like an arm wrestling thing too, but I've seen some athletes, whether it be on a loading pin or even chains or whatever. I've seen people also use like a V bar and kind of do like a similar thing. Do you think that's kind of like a similar kind of concept, or like I'm just curious if you ever kind of messed with anything like that, or if it's you think it's like just like a different take on those static holds?
I think it's a different take. I've seen like Walker, Sarah Backman, and some of the guys under the train. Like I think even Baptiste does it. So it seems to be working well with them because they're pushing really big weight. I haven't done it personally. I think it's a little bit different than the static holds that I do, but might be something that I try to incorporate in my
Yeah, no, I
training
was
and
just kind of
see.
curious because that's definitely something that we haven't, but I do kind of see and I do think that like there's something to be said about like having the endurance to like grind a little bit because that's like one thing I think that especially as you get more proficient with the technique, a lot of times it's kind of like you hit it or like you kind of just die out. So I do think that if you can improve your ability to kind of grind a little bit longer and actually strain, and especially like when you get like you said to that midpoint position where you need to kind of reel it back in, I think that's where like that could really help improve your success point. So it's definitely something to think about, and I think that's definitely a good point. Outside and another thing, kind of point I think is important. I think sometimes people get like too wrapped up with training like only doing the specific contest lift. So I think there's definitely something to be said about unilateral training. Just get generally strong. Is there anything else that you kind of feel like maybe obviously like you've built up a lot of forearm and grip strength up into this point? Is there anything that you've kind of done in the past that maybe helped build up your grip, build up your forearms, any other, because obviously like you had this kind of foundational strength before you even like started implementing these techniques. Anything that you did, I guess, in your earlier years that you kind of attribute some of your, your just general strength to?
Yeah, I mean, um, I was always big into pull-ups, chin-ups with like fat grips. I'm sure you're aware, like the fat grips is really good for like grip strength, making like just general exercises a bit harder. I would throw like the orange fat grips on anything. I have very small hands. So it make obviously would make the lifts much much more difficult. But um for me, I've been doing static holds since I was 18 years old. Like I have on my YouTube channel, I was like 160 pounds doing static holds with like 100-pound dumbbells for time. So it's one of those exercises that even before I was really getting big into arm wrestling has been something that I can trace back a lot of my, I would say, curling strength to, because curling for me, it's never been easy, right? It's not easy to curl heavy weights, but I've always been able to curl a lot of weight. Um,
Cool.
that's really what's worked, what I could trace it back to.
Um, so in terms of, I guess, if people maybe like on the fence of doing a contest or not really sure where to start, if someone's just starting out in their journey, like what recommendation? I know you said just start curling, right? Outside of that, and then maybe they're getting ready for a meet. Any advice do you have someone that's maybe getting ready for like their first competition?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've never been, obviously, I came from like arm wrestling background where you're competing in front of people. Like for me, strict curl was new. Even before my first meet, I was very nervous. Um, just go out there and do it. Like I feel like a lot of people hold back and they like, prefer like online competitions or anything like that. I don't know if I have any good advice, but if you do it, I think you'll get hooked after the first meet. So I think you just need the exposure. Um, you know, do research ahead of time on the rules. A lot of people get excited on their first meet, don't listen to the commands, get eager on the curl, read up on the rule book, make sure that you're well prepared. And if you're well prepared, you're going to execute and do awesome on your first meet. And chances are you're going to get hooked and do subsequent meets as well.
Awesome. I'm trying to like find some some videos on your YouTube channel, but no, it's cool. And I see also you got some heavy like dumbbell preacher curls and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so I definitely think there's something to be said about the heavy unilateral work, whether it's with a dumbbell or with, like I said, an actual barbell. And my understanding, if you're just doing like obviously a single arm barbell curl, you obviously need to make sure the balance and grip is really locked in. So that's definitely a key difference there. Um, Kind of talked about kind of tips starting out. Anything I guess that you're like I guess looking forward to as far as strict curl things that you'd like to see more of? Um, Anything like on the horizon, kind of goals. Obviously, I think that you would you. Yeah, I think that I know like Cooper like ended up he had did the combo curl, so it wasn't like a direct head to head, but obviously he had it's a really good competition at the Arnold. The 220 class was pretty brutal.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, any like kind of goals in the future? Would you like to kind of, maybe get another crack at Baptiste again and maybe, see if you can kind of, so you got a lot of great. So what are your kind of, I guess, thoughts for like the future of the sport and any goals that you're working towards?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of exposure. I know the sport is growing, more competitions, more like the entry point. So you don't have to travel super far to compete is obviously super cool. So glad that RPS is starting up. So it's going to give more exposure to the sport, make it easier to actually attend a meet without having to go across the country or fly to a different state, et cetera. From a goal perspective, I'd like to get the world record back from Raw. I'd like to break it. Bruce has been awesome throughout the entire journey. I've reached out to him like multiple times for advice. Super nice guy. Same way with like John Cooper. He's an absolute legend of the sport. I think he's basically accomplished everything that you can accomplish. Um, but I like that world record. I had it for a very brief moment, only for it to be like broken again. Next year's Arnold's. I think I'm going to ramp up my training a bit. Like I train pretty hard. I know what I'm capable of. I think sometimes I get in my own head sometimes, and I think I left a little bit in the tank transparently at this year's Arnold. And I would say that's like the worst feeling, despite it being like a good performance. It's coulda, shoulda, woulda. So should I have gone for 206? Should I have gone for 208? I think next year, if Baptiste wants to stay in 220, um, let's rerun the dance and let the best man win.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, and just to kind of get to your point there, and I think when you start, I think it is, rising tide raises all ships. So I think that like as people are kind of getting close together in competition, I think that kind of brings out the best in people. Like you said, I don't think Bruce would have like hit that curl if it wasn't for you. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
don't, I would have, you know what I mean? He was probably would have been just content, right? So I think that's kind of cool to see that. And everyone wants to kind of see each other like do better. The other thing I'll say, because I think, it ended up not working out in your favor. But one thing I wanted to kind of mention, shout out to like Ed Joseph. So Ed was kind of in a similar situation where he was up against Joe Morrow, who's a really great strength athlete, very accomplished, and Ed was kind of trailing behind. So sometimes you have to like, you're either defending or you need to like kind of, so like sometimes, the stronger guy might be defending their position. And then other times you're chasing the guy. So like we were kind of chasing Joe. And I just kind of, and I knew Ed was the lighter man, so we just kind of matched him, and then unfortunately, Joe ended up missing his I think his third attempt. So Ed ended up taking a victory over like a very over a stronger athlete, and I think you were in a similar situation where I think that you're a little bit not to just my observation, you're a little bit more of a technical lifter, and Baptiste seems like a little bit more brutally just brute strong. And yeah, he just ended up kind of getting his attempt on his third attempt, and and kind of hats off to him. So it does make for an interesting competition. Sometimes you have to kind of figure out: are you chasing the guy? Are you trying to defend? Are you trying to set the bar really high and kind of get it out of reach? So there's different strategies. I think that it's as a coach, as someone that's kind of putting the numbers in for a lot of athletes, that's always more fun for me to kind of see like who's gonna come out on top, because not always the strongest athlete wins, as you know.
Yep.
You got to like adjust to the umpire. You got to see like what the strike zone is that day. You got to kind of adjust, and sometimes at these big meets, when there's tighter judging, there's higher stakes. Things get shooken up quite a bit. But anyways, it's been fun to watch you compete over the years. Um, where can keep people find you if they want to see more of your training or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, find me on Instagram, Bellwood BD1. I also have two YouTube channels. If you type in Brian Bellwood, you'll find both of them on YouTube. Any questions at all relative to strict curl, some of the weird stuff that I do that you see in videos, or just chatting strict curl in general, just shoot me a DM. I respond to anyone. I'm always happy to do like, virtual lifts, with anyone if they want to like learn or see like some of the different exercises. I'm by no means like a CPT, certified physical trainer, but I'm always happy to share any of the wisdom that I've learned over the years from some of the greats. And, look forward to continuing to stay a student of the business. So tell anyone to reach out anytime.
Yeah, and I think it's good to like exchange ideas and kind of rub elbows with people that have kind of done it. I think that's really like how you learn. I think sometimes people, at least what I've kind of found, sometimes this day and age, sometimes people tend to just like lurk on the internet and they don't actually interact. But it is called social media for a reason, so don't be afraid to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And that's kind of like why we're doing interviews like this, so we can kind of get the word out there. So I appreciate you coming on today. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.